Welcome to the Coding Loft. My name is Sam and today we will be looking at 10 fun CSS animation from sliding to flickering to shaking. This will be a lot of fun, so let's jump right into it. So to get started, all we need is an index.html file and a style.css file. Up here I have a basic CSS reset, and down here a container which will wrap around everything and it will center our text in the middle. So right here you can see that I have this div class container. It's flex and this is flex column and everything is aligned in the center. So that's why it's right in the middle. Our first effect is a sliding in effect. So we will write sliding in right here. And then we will add a class called slide in, which we will now define in our style file. So down here we say slide in, and we want to add our class slide in. In here we will say animation slide in. We will create that in a second. 1.5 seconds, ease in, out, and infinite. So it repeats while we create this class. Now, as you can see, nothing is happening yet because we haven't defined slide in. In order to create this slide in animation, we need to add a keyframe called slide in. You can see that we use this name in the animation up here. And in here we want to specify 3 things. We want to say at 0%, something is happening, 75%, something is happening, and at 100%. Now what do we want? We want that the text slides in from one of the sides. So our final state should be that we say it should be exactly in the middle. So we say translate x, and that's 0 pixels right here. That's the point where we want to end up at 100%. Now up here we want to start somewhere else. We want to have the effect as if the text is sliding in. So we say transform x, and we don't want to start at 0 pixels because that's basically where we end up, but somewhere else. So if I put 100 here, you can see that it slides in from the right to the middle. If I put in 200, then this slide in movement will be larger. Now I want to slide in from the left, so I say minus and then 700, which is this wide slide. Now when something is very fast, it usually goes a little bit above the final destination. So we want to go above our 0 pixel. We want to go to translate 100 pixel, and then we kind of bounce back. So here, now you can see it first bounces to the right and then it goes back to the middle. Now here you can see it bounces to the right and it goes back to the middle after that. This looks nice, but we can give this an even better illusion of movement by saying skew. So this is the way that the text is turning when it is moving. So you can see right here, it starts tilted to the left and then it gets normal again. And down here we want to say skew minus 20 degrees. And that way it will first tilt to the left, then to the right, and then back to the middle. And we can even give this a cooler effect by saying scale 0.9. And now it has this visual effect. It's coming in fast from the left, it starts to break, it slides to the right, and then it stops at the middle. Now that's the slide in effect. Now effect number 2. This time we don't want to slide in, but we want to have a flickering effect. So we add a class of flickering. Back to our style, we can simply just copy that here. And then we say flicker, and we call this flickering. Also here the animation, we want to call it flickering, and now just remove what we had in here before. So we don't want any effect right now. How can we create a flicker effect? It's actually very simple. We just need to play around a little bit with the opacity. So for instance, if we start at opacity 0.2, you can see that it starts with a low opacity and then it gets visible. So at the end we want opacity 1. Now right now it's a fade in effect, not a flicker effect. And the way that we can make it flicker, we just copy this percentage right here and then we add different breakpoints. So let's copy it first, right? And then you say 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, and so on. And now we can play around with different levels of opacity. So for instance, now there's the first flicker. Let's change it to 0.5. Great. 30%, we changed it back to 0. Here let's do 0.8, 0.3, back to 0, 0.7 at 70%, 0.7 here, back to 0. And of course you can play around with the opacity levels right here, but this is just a very simple way to get this nice, cool looking flickering effect. Effect number 3. This will be falling down. So we add a class of fall down, go back to our CSS, and then we just call it fall down. You can press Ctrl D to select this one and the next occurrence, same as here. Select slide in, Ctrl D, and call this fall down. Now again, where do we want to end? We want to set the transform property to translate y 0 pixels. Translate y means that we move it up and down the y-axis. And we want to start at transform. Now here you can play around with the values, but I chose translate y of minus 1000 pixels. And there it is, falling down from the top. Again, I want to create a small bouncing effect, so right here we will move it below the 0 degrees. We will say translate y of 100 pixels, and now it falls down further than it should, and it bounces back up to 0 pixels. And we can also make this look cooler by saying we want to start rotating it at 120 degrees, for instance. And I can see it's sort of flipping while falling down. And again, down here, you say scale 0.9, and that way you create a more realistic bouncing effect. And then you say skew of minus 20 degrees. And now you can see it's skewed while it's falling down. That was our falling down effect. Effect number 4. This time we have a typing animation, so we give it a class of typing. Back to our CSS file, and then down here, our class, we call it typing. So select it, Ctrl D, say typing, and also here, Ctrl D, typing. Now for this animation, we just need the start and the finish property. So 0% and 100%, and we play around with the width. So we start at a width of 0, and then we go to a width of 100. As you can see, it looks like the text is moving to the left. That's because we have flexbox on the main container. So just for the sake of this video, let's now just take align items and just comment it out. And now if you add a background, you can see that the width is actually changing. Then up in our typing class, we say display inline block, as well as overflow hidden. And now you can see that at the beginning it doesn't show because the width is 0%. It's not overflowing of the width of the container. Add in the background just if you want to see what's going on. So the text is never overflowing, and that's why you don't see it at the beginning. Now we also say white space no wrap, so the text doesn't wrap if it's a longer text. And here we want to say steps 20 until the end. Let's put this back out. Now this will look better if the text is longer, so let's just say typing some text. And you can play around here with the time of the animation, as well as with the steps. Now I find that 1 second and steps 20 is usually best. And that's a simple typing animation. Let's come to our next animation, this time shaking. We give it a class of shake and jump to our style file. Again, copy the previous layout and then just select text, Ctrl D, and then we say shake. Now we don't need the steps property anymore. Again, we say ease, in, out. We add in our align item center property. And now up here we want to do a couple of things. So we want to start and finish exactly in the middle. So we say transform, translate x of 0. And because we want the same for the start and the finish position, we can just say 0% and 100% up here. And now it applies the same property for both positions. So down here we want to specify what happens at 10, 30, 50, 70 and 90%. And below that we want at 20%, 40%, 60%, 80%. Now how can we create this shaking animation? Very simple, we just move it from left to right several times. So we say transform, and then we move it along the x-axis, so that's translate x. and we just move it here to the left. And we also want to move it to the other side, so that's transform translate X to 10 pixels. And there you have your shaking effect. Again, you can make this a bit more realistic by skewing it to the left and to the right. So I say skew 10 degrees up here and skew minus 10 degrees down there. It might be a bit too much, so we just change it to, I don't know, 3 degrees. You can play around with these numbers, of course. And that's our shaking effect. Our next effect will be a pop-in effect. So we say popping in, and we give it a class of pop-in. Here, change again typing to pop-in. And these, just for naming convention, we write in camel case, so Control D, pop in with a large I. So 1 second, ease in out, and infinite while we set it up. Now this we can delete. So for this effect we want to start really small and then just grow to regular size. And we do that by using the transform property and in there using scale. So we want to set scale to 0 at the beginning and opacity to 0. As you can see, we don't need to specify anything at the 100% because it automatically goes back to the default state of scale 1 and opacity 1. But we can add it in, and then we can also create a bounce effect as we did earlier. So say scale 1, opacity 1. And then we copy this right here. And at 75%, we have a transform scale of 1.1, and of course an opacity at 1. And now again you have this bouncing effect, and that's how you create a pop-in or a zoom-in effect. Now the next one is a sliding up effect. So we say sliding up, and we give it a class of slide up. Now let's start up here by just changing the name to slide up. Down here, select the text, Control D, and say slide up. And this one we can delete. We just need the 0%, meaning the position where we're starting from. This time we use translate Y, which means the way that it moves up and down. And here we say minus 50 pixels. And now you can see it starts sliding in from the top. And if you want to change the direction, you can just remove the minus sign. And if you want to slide left and right, simply change translate Y to translate X. This is a very common animation, you see it quite often. There you have your slide up animation. Now the next one is a cool one, it's a glowing animation. So we say glowing, and we give it a class of glowing. Back in our CSS, we use the same layout that we had for the shake class. Copy it. And then select it, press Ctrl D 3 times, and then change it all at once in all these places. But of course we don't want the shaking effect, so we remove the transform property down here. Now nothing is happening. So let's get started. And we also want a 100% step that is different from the beginning. So remove the 100% up here. And what do we want? Well, first we want to set the opacity to 0. And give it a text shadow of light gray. So 0 pixels, 0 pixels, 20 pixels. And then we use the color of E2, E2, E2. And you don't see much yet, but you will see it in a second. Now down here we want to change this text shadow. So we don't want this light gray, but we want a dark gray or a black color. And now you can see it has this sort of glow around it. But at the same time, let's change the text color. So we use this hashtag E2, E2, E2 light gray. And now down here we want the opposite. We want, again, hashtag E2, E2, E2. And a color of black. And I forgot we add the 100% up here. We can remove it down there, because that property with text shadow and color is where we want to end up in the end. So now you can see there's a sort of glowing effect, and you can play around by giving it a bigger radius, which is this third property right here. You can also change the color, of course, just to see what it looks like. Let's go with the yellow. Now I use this gray again that we had before. And you can also play around with the sort of flickering effect, so we can just add an opacity of 0.5 here. Now, as you can see, if you change this third property here, which is sort of the blur, then the effect looks quite different. You can also remove all these steps and just go with 50%. Then it looks like this. So play around with this as you like. That is our glowing effect. Now the next one, I call it stamping effect, because this one looks like we're stamping a letter, and just give it a class of stamp. And back in our CSS, let's just copy this. Select the glowing part here, Control D 3 times, and then we call it stamp. And of course we need to remove what we had here. Now we don't have any effect. Great. So let's add an infinite property and make this 1.5 seconds. Now down here we want to set the scale property to 100. So as you can see, it's starting out very big and then just gets to this default space where scale is 1. Now at 80% we want to create a small bounce. So we say scale 0.7. And again we have this bouncing effect that you already saw earlier in the other animations. Now we also want to rotate the text a little, so we say transform, rotate, -40 degrees. And also move it a little bit upwards, so we say translate y of -10 pixels. And there you have your stamping effect. Now lastly, we create a swinging animation, so we say swinging, and we give it a class of swing. In our style file, we copy the stamp part here, select stamp, Control D 3 times, and we change it to swing. Now obviously we don't need that effect, so we delete all of this. And now nothing is happening. And now again we want to group different breakpoints, so 100% and 0% they have the same property. So we want to rotate this text, and we want to rotate it to 0 in the beginning and in the end. So we say transform, rotate 0 degrees. Nothing is happening. But now comes the fun part. Down here we say 10%, 30%, 50%, and so on. And here we say 20%, 40%, 60%, and 80%. And here we want to rotate it to the right. So we say transform, rotate 10 degrees. Now you can see that it's tilting to the right. And down here we say transform, rotate -10 degrees. So that's the other side. And now you have the swinging effect. Now there's one cool trick. You see that it's swinging around this axis in the middle, and we can change this axis point. And the way that we do that is we say transform origin, and the default is center. So right now nothing is happening, but we can say top, and now the axis has moved from the center to the top of the text. You can also say bottom, and now it's swinging around the axis at the bottom. You can also give it a pixel number here, even 1000 pixel, and as you can see it goes crazy. So play around with that, but that's how you create a cool little swinging animation.